the Afar Triangle. In 1973, a French-American team began to search the area, which they suspected could be rich in pre-human fossils. What they found may have pushed the story of humanity back to 3.5 million years ago. October. Don Johanson was leader of the American team. This reenactment, based on his book, Lucy, shows how he literally stumbled onto the first of 3 amazing discoveries. The bone seemed to be the shin of a small primate. Upright walking humans had never been found in soil this old, soil which team geologists had dated to 3.5 million years BC. He carefully marked and cataloged the spot. Johanson spotted another bone. He couldn't believe his luck. Fossil limbs are extremely rare, and his 2 fragments fit into a perfect knee joint. What he noticed next took his breath away. He knew that the knees of apes meet in a straight line, human knees at a slight angle. This knee looked almost human. That evening, Johanson and one of his graduate students snuck outside of camp to a nearby Afar burial mound. Johanson kept insisting he had to find a human femur for comparison. The student was worried. The Afar zealously guard their ancestral mounds. If the anthropologists were caught robbing graves, they might be shot, or worse. Luckily, inside the mound was a modern femur. Except for size, the bones were almost exactly the same. They respectfully replaced the femur. From the knee joint alone, Johanson suspected the unknown creature walked upright. His subsequent discoveries were to revolutionize our beliefs of when the first human walked the earth. The following year, Johanson returned to the Afar with a larger group. The digs began to yield dramatic finds: prehistoric hippos, crocodiles, the huge skull of an extinct mastodon. Meanwhile, the painstaking search continued for human ancestors. They would have considered themselves lucky that season to find a single pre-human bone. That's why the events of late November were unbelievable. Johanson hit his second streak of luck. Crossing down a small gully, he spotted a bone. And another. They pulled out a vertebrae, part of an arm, and more. Had they found King Solomon's mines, the scientists could not have been more overjoyed. What they dug from the dry soil would eventually bring them fame, scientific acclaim, and a backlash of controversy that continues to this day. For they had found a full-grown woman, 3.5 feet tall, weighing 50 pounds. A woman who was not quite human. Dr. Johanson and his colleague, Dr. Tim White, analyzed the fossils and later named a new species.
Well, what we see here is one of the most remarkable discoveries that's ever been made in the study of human origins. We have a skeleton which is about 40% complete. Normally, we're happy when we find a bit of a jaw or a bit of an arm, and here we've got parts of legs, parts of arms, parts of the skull, nearly a complete lower jaw. And she's popularly come to be known as Lucy. To anthropologists around the world, she's known as Australopithecus afarensis, or the Afar ape man. And she represents for us the oldest, most complete human ancestor known from anywhere in the world.
What Lucy shows us is a creature that was a mosaic creature. Her hip, her knee, her foot would have been very human in appearance, and yet when we look to parts of her face, represented here by her lower jaw, we find that it's very protruding lower portion of the face. We have portions of her brain case, and they show that the brain was very, very small, smaller even than some modern chimpanzees.
We have been looking and are always looking for various links in the evolutionary chain. And one of the interesting links in the evolutionary chain, which has been filled by the discovery of Lucy, is this intermediate form. That is to say, we've got a form that's fully upright, walking on two legs, just as modern humans do, but still has a lot of evolutionary change necessary to make it truly human in the teeth and the face, the jaws, and the size of the skull. So here we have essentially found a very interesting and provocative link between something that was partly human and partly ape-like.
What did Lucy look like? No record of skin color or hair density remains. This reenactment is one possible interpretation. In the hostile environment around primitive African lakes, frequented by large predators, Lucy's upright walking may have offered a new talent for survival. For the first time in primate evolution, the hands were free, hands which were shaped just like ours.
We can assume that these hominids were at least as intelligent as a modern chimpanzee. But we can't assume that they were more intelligent or that they had speech or anything like that because we don't have any record of their tools. We don't find a stone tool record until much later in time, much younger than Lucy.
The upright walk of a human, the strength and agility of an athlete, and the brain of a chimpanzee. Could Lucy talk? Could she reason? Could she remember the past and plan for the future? According to Johansen and White, not very much. The talent for stone tool making would not come for another 1,000,000 years. In that sense, Lucy was still an animal. Not all scientists agreed with this interpretation. A year after the Lucy find, Johansen was again in the field, seeking more evidence, and again he struck gold. A movie crew was present when his team unearthed an entire pre-human family, at least a dozen who somehow perished together. In the years since this monumental discovery, scientists are still arguing its meaning. Some experts claim the bones represent not one, but 3 species, that Lucy was completely human, that Lucy was a knuckle-walking ape, that Lucy's family evolved into humans. The controversy continues. If Lucy is our predecessor, and if the date of her life and death and 3.5 million years is correct, this little creature who lived without speech or reasoned thought would be the ancestor of me, of you, of all of us, 200,000 generations removed. 1,000,000 generations before Lucy, fossil fragments have been found of little primates called Ramapithecus. The theory of evolution claims these monkeys as our ultimate ancestors. A few footprints in Texas rocks, however, might prove that Lucy doesn't belong to us at all, that evolution is wrong and the Bible right. If the theory of natural evolution is correct, then the Earth must be very old. What scientists call the geologic column is layer after layer of rocks built up over time. A slice through this birthday cake would expose 4 billion years of slow change. Human bones would be found only in the very top, and dinosaur bones only in the middle. Today, most scientists would agree. Most, but not all. A growing number of scientists who call themselves creationists interpret these strata very differently. They believe the world and man were created about 10,000 years ago, and most of these rock layers were deposited during Noah's flood. It's hard to imagine a more controversial split today in the ranks of science. At the Institute for Creation Research in San Diego, scientists are gathering to coordinate and publish their interpretation of origins. The Creation Research Society now claims 700 PhDs and Masters of Science. John Morris is one of their experts in geology.
I feel that humans lived throughout the entire geologic column, and that the geologic column could very well have been, and in fact I feel was, laid down by a single major hydraulic catastrophe.
Dr. Morris was principal investigator on one of the most amazing bits of creationist evidence ever found, the footprints in the Paluxy River in Texas.
It was about the turn of the century, 1908, something like that, when there was a major flood on the Paluxy River. And the people then began to see markings in the rock that they had never seen before and didn't understand. They were these huge prints of these bird-like creatures with 3 toes, things of this nature, and soon people figured out they were dinosaur footprints, and it was an amazing find.
Discovery of the dinosaur prints attracted many scientists to this rural area. Some of the huge tracks were removed to various universities, and some were sold on the black market. Today, the area is incorporated into Dinosaur State Park to protect the remaining tracks. The giant reptile prints are fascinating, but other nearby tracks are more difficult to explain. Creationists claim they are human footprints in the same Cretaceous layer, placed at the same time as the dinosaur prints. Yet the theory of evolution insists humans and dinosaurs never coexisted.
This, I think, is one of the main evidences for the revision of the geologic column. To find humans and dinosaurs together is totally incompatible with our modern-day concepts of evolution and uniformitarianism.
Then, evidence came to light that some of the prints may have been fakes. A team of creationists excavated, attempting to answer once and for all the charges of a hoax.
Throughout the 60s and around 68 to 71 or so, there was a whole lot of activity at the Paluxy River to uncover new prints, go back into the river, to turn over new rock shells where the river has not been before, where there's no chance of carving. These prints are inside, in place, and there's no chance that they were carved. These are prints as they were laid down in the original mud, which later turned to limestone.
6 new trails were exposed, startling evidence for the creationist claim. The Bible tells explicitly the creation of the world, not in 4 billion years, but in 6 days. For creationists, there is only one origin of the species: divine creation. Animals were made in their own kind, and Adam was fashioned from dirt in the image of God. For evolutionists, blind chance changed simians into sapiens. Dr. Duane Gish, a biochemist, has written that man did not evolve, that fossils such as Neanderthal and Lucy are misinterpretations of deformed humans or extinct apes.
I believe that these creatures, such as the Australopithecines, were apes, not intermediate, and they were certainly not men. The primates make up one of the 32 orders of mammals, and as George Gaylord Simpson, one of the world's leading evolutionists, has stated, every one of these 32 orders of mammals have appeared with their distinct ordinal characteristics already complete. In other words, from the very start, when the first time you see a bat, it's a bat. A whale is a whale, a primate is a primate, and a hoofed animal is a hoofed animal. And there are no transitional forms, no intermediate going back to their supposed ancestral order.
The Paluxy prints are one of many claims which have fired a recent scientific controversy. A controversy which is often very heated.
Well, I think that the only place that we have definitive evidence for humans and dinosaurs existing together is in cartoons. And essentially what we're looking at probably is somebody's attempt to pull a joke on scientists.
Science, by their definition, is the attempt to explain everything without a supernatural. Now, to me, that is incompatible with science as it calls itself a search for truth, because if there is truth outside the naturalistic scheme of things, then any attempt to explain things without a supernatural element is doomed to failure. And I feel that much of evolution science is doomed to failure because of that very assumption.
It may be that those human footprints that are there, I've not seen them, were simply carved in the same rock levels in which you found dinosaur footprints.
Right. These have never been published in the scientific literature, and scientists have never been invited to critically examine the footprints.
No,
until that happens.
We would welcome an opportunity to go and look at these footprints and to investigate them personally.
Most of the journals that publish scientific literature are committed to an evolutionary position, an evolutionary framework. And articles that would be antagonistic toward that viewpoint would seldom be approved for publication. On many occasions, creationists have written to journals to publish articles, or even letters to the editor, that sort of thing, and very, very seldom are they published.
There's a sense that people say there's this discontinuity between the family of man and the family of apes, but if we look at extant forms, living forms today, and we study the anatomy, we study the biochemistry, we study the blood, we study the actual DNA sequences, we find out that there is a lot of overlap between apes and humans, and obviously somewhere in the past they shared a common ancestor.
Now the similarities in the proteins, of course, are not startling. That we would predict that on the basis of creation. Because we are living in the same world, we are drinking the same water, eating the same food, breathing the same air, we have exactly the same metabolic problems. We believe God, the Creator, then, having solved these problems, would have essentially used the same solution in each case. But the distinguishing features between man and chimpanzees are really startling. Of course, he has a brain about 1/3 of ours, and the many other characteristics of chimpanzee are tremendously different than man. He has no ability to speak. He does not think abstractly. Does not think into the future. Does not think about the past. Very, very different from man. He is indeed an animal. We are human.
Okay, one of the things that modern creationists are trying to do is to masquerade under a banner called scientific creationism and act as though they are actually scientists working within the scientific forum. This is not true. In fact, what these people have are a set of beliefs, usually based on the chapter of Genesis in the Bible. And instead of testing their propositions and trying to answer questions, they already have the answers, and they're not asking any questions.
There's no way that we can construct testable scientific theories about origins. Evolution is no more scientific than creation, and it's certainly as religious. It is a basic dogma of humanism, atheism, agnosticism, and things of that nature.
The debate has moved from the laboratory to the classroom to the courtroom. It was once thought settled. It probably never will be. Those scientists who espouse evolution and those who believe in creation will probably never close the gap. Hopefully, they can agree on one point. Science needs healthy skepticism.
And we shouldn't forget the famous Nebraska man, based upon a single tooth found in western Nebraska in 1922. Some of the world's greatest authorities were very excited by this discovery, and they were convinced it was part of a primitive subhuman ancestor of man. And the Illustrated London News had their artist draw a picture of this creature. It turned out to be very manlike. Showed a picture of the man and his wife and the tools that they were using based upon this single tooth. However, a few years later, they discovered the skeleton of this creature, the remainder of the skeleton. And it turned out to be neither a man-like ape nor an ape-like man. It turned out to be a pig. Now, again, the startling thing is that great authorities had mistaken a pig's tooth for an evolutionary form of man. Now, they were honest scientists. They were very good scientists and very careful scientists. What had happened? You see, this is what they had wanted to find, this is what they had expected to find, and therefore this is what they tended to see.
The search for the missing links of our origin will continue. Perhaps we really hope to find our destiny.